Hello, everybody. Today, I'm going to talk to you about in times of unprecedented change, we need to play a bigger game. And I'm just going to share my screen with you. Bear with me. Here we are. I'll make this a bit bigger as well while I'm at it. There we are. So, in times of unprecedented change, we need to play a bigger game. So what is unprecedented change? Well, it's that kind of change that changes everybody's way of living and day-to-day life. So without going into a lot of social history, I'm just going to show you this diagram. It's the 6 main phases of change, waves of change since the mid-1700s. Prior to that, about 10,000 years ago, we had a shift from hunter-gatherer to agricultural. It was the agricultural revolution and started to create farms and farming and everything agricultural. It was quite a shift for people. Then we had, in the mid-1700s, we had the Industrial Revolution when machinery was brought into textile mills and all of that kind of factories were built and that whole way of working was created. Then we had steam railways that created ease for travel. Then we had the advent of electricity, and then we had electronics, and then we had the information age, and then the digital age, and we're really kind of moving through that, and that is changing, you can see, exponentially. Hang on. And by exponentially, I mean it's doubling. You can see it's all happening faster, where things used to take thousands of years because of the advances in technology. It's happening quicker, and the changes are combinational, and they all build on each other, so it gets quicker and quicker. And we're now into very fast changes. And I'll say a little bit more about that as I go on. But for the moment, I want you to imagine, how would your home be if you had no electronics or electricity? You'd no washing machine, and you had no dryer, you'd no electric ovens, you'd no central heating, you'd no hair dryers, no hair straighteners. You had none of those electrical equipment. You didn't have no iPhone, any of those electrical or electronic devices. Think how life would be. Well, that actually was done by girls mostly. All that washing, cleaning, sorting things out, running errands. It was girls' work. Now, this photograph is actually one that was taken at a children's home. And my mother grew up in a children's home. She and her 3 siblings went into a children's, it was an industrial school, but otherwise known as a children's home, where they were trained to be servants. And the reason my mother and her siblings went into that was their mother, my grandmother, died giving birth to her 5th child. And that's how life was back in those days. It was hard. If your mother died, you could just like that, find yourself in a children's home being trained to be a servant. Actually, my mother was quite an intelligent woman, but that was her fate. That was girls' work. Women's work, you'll see, was working in laundries. You'll see the great big vats for all the sheets to go in. And it was big business in those days because people had no ways of washing them but by hand. And these women were women who grew up in the children's homes, or they were women who had had illegitimate babies. they got put in what was known as the Magdalen laundry. And that's another story. They were all over around, they were also all over the UK. And it was very difficult to get out of them. You couldn't get out unless you had a father or a brother who could sign you out. So that was the way work was. So if you were a bit more middle class or a bit wealthier, you had one of these girls would come and do all your work for you, and the women in the laundry would do all your laundry. So that was my mother's beginning in life. And I didn't actually know my mother or meet my mother until I was in my 30s, but I'll tell you about that as I go. So the game changers in my lifetime was the advent of electricity and the electric and plastic. So you know, the house that I grew up in, I was born illegitimately. My mother had me illegitimately, and I was left with some people who were going to take care of me, which they did, but my mother never came back. So I remember gaslight, and I remember being fascinated with changing the little thing inside. I can't remember the name of it, but then it shifted to electricity, and that was an absolute game changer, as was the advent of plastic. So before that, what women used was washboards, mangles, and it was all terry toweling nappies that you washed by hand. And here's a woman here who is beating her rugs. There weren't fitted carpets in those days because there were no vacuum cleaners, and women would take their rugs out and put them over the clothesline once a week if they were very house proud, maybe once every few weeks, because it was hard work. They were big rugs and they had to move all the furniture, drag them out, put them over the line. So it made, you can imagine, the advent of electricity made huge difference in women's work. They used to say a woman's work's never done, and it's true. By the time they did the weekly washing and the shopping and the cooking, without any of the electrical devices that we've got, you know, it was tiring for them. It was tiring. So that was a big change in my lifetime. The other thing is there were no house phones, not until like in the 50s. And people used to go to the telephone box, and Sunday evenings they would queue up to make their phone calls. You know, most of you watching this won't ever have used a public telephone box, but that's what everybody had to use. So in the 50s, everybody was getting, they had electricity, so they were getting washing machines and vacuum cleaners. I think it was in the 60s or 70s actually, when disposable nappies came in, and that made a huge difference. So the workload that women had was cut down drastically with the advent of electricity and then plastic. For me, I was always learning. When I started school, I had a slate and chalk. It was before plastic. We didn't have pens. We had wooden pens with nibs, but to start off with, it was a slate and chalk. And I just, from the minute I could write my name with a pen and ink, which was a wooden one, I fell in love with writing. So I loved writing this much. I loved reading as well, although I grew up in a household where nobody read anything. There were no books. I took to it. So my values are to learn, to grow, to contribute, and to make an impact. And one of my passions in life, which is the why Western women, one of my passions is to be all that I can be, all that I may be, to reach that potential that the teachers always said I wasn't reaching, to become all that I may be and have a purpose while I'm on this earth. And part of that for me is to help other people, and mainly women, to become all that they may be too. So what I'm calling is consciousness raising. I the start for me in consciousness raising really was when I went into therapy in my early 30s, when my mother contacted me for the first time, and I went into therapy to get over it. And it really made such a difference to me. I thought, I really want to do that. So I did subsequently go on to become a social worker, and then a counselor, a psychotherapist, a family mediator, a life, business, and executive coach. So I just kept on learning. And then when it came up to time to think about retirement, I decided I would do women's groups and help them to raise their consciousness too. So that's why I do what I do. In my years as a psychotherapist, which I still do a bit of, I realized that women were liberated but not empowered. So the big changes in the big changes in the 50s, 60s, 70s, you know, were huge, but we were liberated, but definitely not empowered, because I had to learn myself that mostly women are undervalued, underachieving, and under-earning. And that is still the case today, with very, very highly trained, experienced, intelligent, clever women. They are not achieving their potential. Which I'll go into again. So retirement, I was coming up to 70, and the question came up about retirement. And that was when I decided, no, I don't want to carry on seeing so many clients, but I want to raise women's awareness. And I started a group, Damsels in Success. It was a kind of a franchise license thing. And I started to do that about 4 years ago. And it was quite successful here, but actually there were little bits of the values of it didn't sit with me, because it was very much me, myself, and I, and my little group. Actually, what for me, I was beginning to see myself as part of humanity, part of women worldwide. And so I decided not to retire. I had had a very unhappy, abusive marriage, which I had come out of it, you know, like 25 years ago, no, 35 years ago, and spent 10 years single, getting over it. And then I met Alan, and we've had a very happy and successful marriage. So I've been jogging along quite happily in life, but I did really feel prompted to carry on doing this work with women. What kind of made it gel for me was the comments that the Dalai Lama made in 2010 at the Nobel Peace Prizes, and there were about 10 women nominated, and you know, it was quite noticeable. And he said that the world would be saved by Western women. He carried on subsequently to make comments about women having more empathy and more compassion, and that if women were the defense ministers of their countries, there would be fewer wars, because women would care more about the wounded and what have you. So I was quite taken with what he said and what he might have meant by that. And I guess that he meant that Western women, that we had the vote, we had lifetime education, high employment, we had contraception, increased earnings, we owned property, we could have seats in parliament. Indeed, we'd had a female prime minister, we could travel, we had freedom. So there was a lot going for us. And with the soft power skills that we have, and Harvard University did loads of studies on the soft power skills of women and the difference it makes to corporations, corporates, teams that they're in, the productivity is way up when there are women in the teams. So women in the East and other parts of the world don't have the same resources or availability of resources or access to them as we have. You've only got to think of young Malala, who got shot in the head just for going to school. In a lot of countries, it's not acceptable for women to be educated, much less, you know, in jobs other than sex trafficking, and having freedom to go about without chaperones and things. So this change, even in the last 10 years since the Dalai Lama said that, has moved on hugely. And I just wanted to say that one of the big changes is biotech, the robots. You know, in anywhere we can have a surgeon on a piece of robotic equipment in London or anywhere can be doing operations on somebody in Africa remotely. Through using camera and robotic equipment. It's just absolutely amazing when we can have new hearts and new lungs and new all sorts. Some of the other disruptive innovations, because I think it's important for you to get a handle on just how much the world's changing and how quickly. What I'm saying there about the Dalai Lama, that's been in the last 10 years, but also we've had Netflix, blue light blockbusters. We've got Uber, that, you know, was an innovation on cheap available transport. We have Apple. Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak were lads in their garage virtually and created that. Google, the same. Young people creating it. YouTube is only about 10 years old. Within 18 months to 2 years, these businesses became worth millions and billions. So things are happening very fast, very quick. It used to be business development took, you know, it was all different phases and you had to build it up, and it was start up, and then it was development, and then lift off. Actually, that's all happening very fast now, and yesterday's wisdom is not going to work with today and today's technology. One of the other things that I want to mention that's unprecedented change is the fallout of unconscious living. This, although you can't see it, it is an island of plastic and rubbish about the size of France, actually, taken from the air. That all those, you know, that unprecedented change from when I was young, this is the fallout, because we just thought, well, we've never had it so good, it's wonderful, everybody's still buying packs of nappies galore. Thankfully, terry nappies are coming back again, because there's now an awareness, all that Tupperware and all that stuff that we all went mad and bought, over the years, you know, it spread, and it's not biodegradable. So here we have these islands of plastic, which of course is affecting the sea life, the fish, and actually in the clothes that we wear, if they're not natural, the microfibers get into the fish, which then gets in the food chain. And it is a huge problem. We may not be aware of it, but we need to be aware of it. And this is part of playing a bigger game. All these changes are happening, and we need to be aware of the changes, and we need to be aware of the downsides of the changes, rather than just, you know, being unconscious. The other big thing in this time that we're all in is climate change, the wars. Do you know, it would take $10 billion to provide clean water for everybody on the earth. Like, there's billions of people don't have access to clean water, and it would cost 10 billion, it was assessed by a think tank, to provide clean drinking water for everybody in the world. Now that seems like a huge amount of money, but do you know in 2015 we spent, mostly America and the UK and a couple of other countries, spent $7.6 trillion on war and war equipment. So weigh it up. And I would say we all need to be aware of where any savings we have, any investments we have, where does that go? If in a lot of cases, it probably finds its way into supporting war. And we need to play a bigger game and become more aware of it. Nationalism, right-wing nationalism and very right-wing politics also is having a huge effect on loads of refugees and people being displaced and massive war orphans. We need to be aware of these things. To make the changes we want to see in the world, we need to change the way we think, feel, and behave, and we need to engage with what's going on and not be like an ostrich. What we talk about in Western women is the fact that we are not just these 3D human beings. We are multi-dimensional energy beings. Everything is energy. The floor you're standing on, this building, everything is energy, and we are energy. And we have our physical body, but we have an etheric body, an emotional body, a mental body, our energy body and a spiritual body, and lots of other bodies, which is too much to go into now. And we need to stop seeing ourselves as just this person, this little 3D person who feels quite helpless and powerless and thinks, oh, what can I do? On our own, thinking in 3D, no, we can't do very much. We need to play a bigger game. So if you think about the Me Too movement, Me Too was mostly women using hashtags. And it built momentum. Women who didn't know each other, had never met each other, possibly didn't even like each other, but the fact is they had something in common. They had been abused. And it built up from one woman and making the suggestion, it built up and it carried around the world. Because actually the truth is we are all interconnected. We're energy and we are interconnected. And there's loads of science and physics that if you want to look into it, you'll see how we are interconnected. We can't see it, it's invisible connections. The internet's invisible, but we're all connected. But equally, we've got invisible electromagnetic energy apart from anything else. So the Time's Up movement, that started and was carried around the world. Fortunately, the internet allows us to do that. This image here is of what became known as the Indian Wall. It was Indian women who were protesting about a couple of Indian women who went into a temple when it was deemed that they were breaking the law. Women shouldn't be in the temple. So these women decided to protest. They just stood side by side with their arm out, not doing anything, but just standing in solidarity with these women. And that line of women went on for nearly 400 miles. So if you imagine from Plymouth right to London and beyond, those women lined up. And of course, it was filmed and shown all around the world. So if it had been individual women, they would have suffered the same fate of the women that they were supporting, that had been thrown in jail or beaten up or otherwise sanctioned. But because they joined together in numbers, they made a strong point and it was picked up. And now I'm talking to you about it. So what I'm saying here is you'll always make more progress with the support of others rather than trying to go it alone. women need a safe port. And actually, Western women as a group, I believe, is a safe port for women to grow and develop and become all that they may be. And a rising tide floats all boats. As we all create a wave of support, we actually can support those women in other countries. We can support them on social media and by going out there and mentoring in lots of different ways. We can float all boats. You know, there are crowd funds available for paying the legal fees of women who are taking up, they're playing a bigger game, but where they get taken to court and have legal fees to pay, there's crowdfunding money available for them to do that. And, you know, when we were getting the Nancy Astor statue up, it was crowdfunding from different women, but there were men as well, I guess, who help with that. So a rising tide floats all boats. There's what Western women are about is empowerment of the collective and empowerment of us as one of many. There is a power in our collective heart, and that's one of the topics that I'll be talking about in Western Women Mean Business in our monthly meetings. But how to generate that power and how to generate the power that you can't see and the power of the collective. So we need to play a bigger game. It's an inside job. You'll see here's another version of the diagram that I showed you of us as energy beings. How many of you do Reiki or acupuncture or chakra balancing? Yeah, quite a few of you would be doing that kind of work. You'll know that we get blocked. Our energy body gets blocked. These little things show the blocks that we have. It can be limiting beliefs. It can be a traumatic event. It could be deep sorrow that we're carrying that never got cleared. And those things do block your energy. That's how I came to know, by clearing some of my early traumatic events and clearing the energy that was blocking. It made a huge difference to me, and it's making a difference to me now, as I hopefully am making a difference to you, and that you will then make a difference to somebody else. So it goes, the ripples go out into the world, but it is an inside job, and before we change things out there, we need to change things in here. So this is one of my favorite quotes. It's Martha Graham. She says, there is a vitality, a life force, an energy, a quickening that is translated through you into action. And because there is only one of you in all time, this expression is unique. And if you block it, it will never exist in any other medium, and it will be lost. So there. So this is David Hawkins' vibrational scale, and you'll see here, I just wanted you to know this because I'm doing this very quickly. Look, this is the range of emotions that we can feel, from shame, guilt, apathy, grief, fear, anger, through courage and neutrality, through to acceptance, love, joy, peace, enlightenment. So on that scale, the extensive life work of Dave Hawkins, he showed that, and this is confirmed by all kinds of science, that when we're in a state of a particular emotion, say like fear or anger or apathy, we emit a low frequency. You know, we all have a frequency, and we emit a low frequency, and that's a contracted or low frequency. But actually in our bodies, we tend to be contracted. We block our breathing, we breathe very, very shallowly. Whereas when we get to 500 or above, we're into love, joy, and peace, and it's expanded. We tend to be relaxed and open. And so one of the things that we do in Western Women is to teach you how to stay in a higher frequency. So you will attract the things in alignment with that frequency. And that is relevant. It's good for you to know. It does make a difference if you're mithering and worrying about things, that you're keeping yourself in a low frequency, that you need to play a bigger game and be aware and keep yourself in a higher frequency. Shift yourself out of it. Talk to yourself and recognize, no, you are enough. You are enough. We all are enough. It's a case of just uncovering what our blocks are and tuning into what's going on in the world and being supportive and collaborative and encouraging with each other. And, you know, different women in different groups, we don't have to be the same as each other, but we can still be for each other and be on each other's side. So looking at Western Women, here's just a photo of Western Women, one of our meetings. We meet in the in Burringdon Hall Hotel, and it's a lovely vibe at the meeting. It's a lovely venue, and we love our meetings. We really thrash things out and become all that we may be. Our values are to learn, to grow, contribute, and make an impact. And we also have Western Women Mean Business online. I just launched that in January, and that's a monthly masterclass online, monthly visibility and planning meeting, and an online book club, which is great fun. There's a free membership which will let you access the online book club, and the paid membership, you can access all three. So I hope that was all useful for you. Playing a bigger game. Look, here's an African proverb. When spider webs unite, they can tie up a lion. And I'm saying when webs of women unite, they can halt war. And I think it's time that you start to realize you're more than just this physical 3D person. You are an energetic being, and you can make huge changes in the world. You can play a bigger game. You can become more conscious, more aware, more grown, and you can join with other women and actually change the world. So bye for now.